You went from a college graduate to a head trader at Credit Suisse to a VP at Goldman Sachs, and now you're an entrepreneur. How do you raise $15 million?
It wasn't as straightforward as that.
When I'm like talking on the phone and I say, I want to go to Florida, and then I see an advertisement, book your flight to Florida, this would be able to fix privacy issues like that. I have a strong feeling that Signal has a backdoor from the government. Will you add a backdoor to your software?
Absolutely no.
Can you give us like a guide on how to get money from the government? So there are Israeli firms and Canadian firms that are helping you get US military grants as an American.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
When I first encountered it, you scratch your head. You're like, how does this make sense?
Palantir got money from In-Q-Tel, which is CIA. I think Google Earth got money as well from In-Q-Tel, which was, CIA.
Talk about AI. Where do you think all of that fundamental research came from? I don't know about you, but the biggest money is...
How you doing?
Oh, very good. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
How do you raise $15 million? How do you go from like a college graduate to doing all these things?
So, it wasn't as straightforward as that. Once I graduated college out of Columbia in New York, I ended up doing about 10 years of coding for trading systems. So I helped create index arbitrage trading system, which is, in other words, you trade futures or option combinations against a basket of stocks, right? And so did that for about 10 years. And then at Credit Suisse, I got an opportunity to end up on the program trading desk, which is the agency side of the business, so commission-based business. And, I started there because the head of the desk, the agency sales desk, it's I guess back then there was a lot of, maybe it still exists today, I'm sure to some degree, non-technical people interacting with technical management. Sometimes there's there's a problem with understanding, right, and trust. And he was not trusting everything the IT guys are telling him. So he wanted somebody who knew technology, and he was willing to teach how to trade baskets. So I'm like, hey, I know basket trading systems, so I might as well try this. And that's how I became a trader. And eventually I became head of the trading side on that domestic agency desk.
You must have made them a lot of money to make you the head of the desk.
Well, it's we did pretty well, and a lot of it was technology was just not fast enough. And I don't know if you know, there was a series of funds called the Ridex funds, and they had this very interesting model where people could put money to work in the Ridex funds right before the market closed. And what we did was we used my technical chops with the trading desk and the IT guys to facilitate that trade, that we could actually get a basket of trades from the client into the market within about 2 minutes. Now, these days you would say, wow, that's really slow, right? But back then that was cutting edge, right? To be able to take a list that comes in a spreadsheet and then turn that into orders for our system and shove it down into the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ in that period of time. So I think things have come a long way, but back then it wasn't, it was technically challenging because you had primitive systems. But, we did that kind of stuff and grew the business.
As a trader, I'm a trader as well, and I see there's a lot of these influencers, a lot of these, modern day traders that are selling courses on how to trade. They draw lines on charts,
right?
All these kind of strategies. As a quant, what do you think about that? Do you think there's any merit? You draw like 3 lines on a chart and you can predict what's going to happen?
There are patterns. So there's no doubt that there are market patterns, and whether you believe the patterns existed first or that people believe in the pattern and make it happen, it's up to you. But I think they are self-fulfilling to some degree, and it happens often enough that with proper risk control, you can actually get some alpha out of that system, right, out of that trade. The problem is risk control and discipline. So people are people. It's the rare individual who will be so disciplined that they will get out when their signal says get out, and they will cut their losses when it goes south, right? And the whole point is that when you go into these more sophisticated operations where everything is automated, there you'll see how they could scale that kind of stuff, right? And then I think when you're a single trader, how many names, how many strategies can you keep track of simultaneously? You can't. Maybe 2, maybe 5 if you're really good, right? And that's why you can't scale. And then if you make one bad mistake or you overlook something, you're going to have a bad day, right? Even though you may have 4 winners and 1 loser, your loser may overcome all your winners. And so some of these more sophisticated outfits, they diversify all of these things, and then they really start automating their risk controls to their preferences. Now, every system that I know has biases built in, and you have a lot of hedge funds that operate like almost like they'll have 100 teams doing different strategies, and then they'll allocate capital according to who's doing well, right? So it's like they don't expect everybody to be winning all the time, but what they'll do is they'll minimize risk because they don't know who's going to pop up in a good way, and they need to allocate capital to them.
So you're a quantitative trader, though. Would you say that most, if not all, traders are successful not due to discretionary trades, but because of stochastic analysis based on the market?
I mean, so what I've done is I've been so the type of trader I was in the institutions that I work for is I'm a technical trader, and I know how to implement trades from quantitative models, right? So there's 2 different things. It's like you're a model builder and you're looking for alpha and trying to figure out how to create new lists. But then you need somebody who knows how trades are done, what systems you have, and how to take that and do it efficiently, right? And how to minimize the tracking risk. So that was my specialty was figuring out what it is that the quant is trying to do, and then express that into the most efficient way that they could hit the markets with, get in, get out with very little impact. And also any new quants, I'm also kind of giving them sort of what I've seen from the reality side of the business, right? So one of the most easiest things that you've seen that somebody's a new quant is they'll quickly start, they won't look at large cap stocks. They'll start immediately going into small cap stocks. So you know what these tiny market cap stocks, right? And there's literally thousands and thousands of them, and they'll be like, oh, we could make 3% a day doing this kind of quant on this series of stocks here, and I'm like, what you're seeing is not real. And they're like, what do you mean? But my model says, I could do 10-year back testing, and here it is. And I'm like, no. What you're seeing is the bid offer spread, which is probably 50 bips to 100 bips, and you think that that's capturable, but it isn't, right? And some of them listen, others don't. They go to market and they lose their shirt, right? And then there's always this contention. The new portfolio manager who's concentrating in the small cap area will be like, my quant system works, it's terrible trading, it's slippage, and then you always have this contention, right? And but the good ones, they understand that bid offer spreads, you can't you can't expect to capture that spread.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen that. You've seen the illiquid stocks that have 20, 30, 50 cent spreads, right? And if you think you're going to capture that, there's just you have to be incredibly patient. You need very, very specific systems that are going to sit there for a long time so that you're on the right side of the spread and capture that. And there's actually mutual funds then and institutions that actually engage in that type of alpha capture.
Since you left your position as VP, are you still trading? Are you still like actively doing quantitative investing or just long-term investing?
So since I started Nuts Tech, so I started Nuts Tech back in about 2016, and then Boltz Technologies, we spun it off from Nuts Tech in 2020, last year, about a year ago. It's been very, very hectic trying to get into the mindset of like an entrepreneur and inventing stuff and actually putting things to work. So I put it on hold. For about, I would say literally 10 years, I haven't really actively traded. I put stuff into index funds. I would take long-term, positions and stocks that I know will, it's going to stay there for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
But back probably like about 2 years ago, I started looking at what was going on with AI and NVIDIA, ARM, and things like that. And I've been going back in, but I haven't been doing quantitative trading. What I've been doing is something that allows me to trade maybe once or twice a month, right? And that you gotta have a view that you're comfortable with. And so I do kind of like, I take time horizons of 3 to 6 months or even longer, and I'll try to pick, nice soft spots to get into and try to ride it out. Now, it's concentrated portfolio. It's not quantitative at all. Quantitative takes a lot of work. You have to be dedicated. You have to scrounge around a lot of data sources, and then you can't just do it part-time. But taking outsized bets on a thesis, you could do that because you could just keep track of the news, keep track of the earnings reports, see what's going on, and adjust along the way. But it may require 1 or 2 trades a month.
Can I tell you a secret?
Sure.
Last thing we'll talk about investing because we have so much to cover. You have a very interesting story. Sometimes when I do these podcasts, I'm in the middle of a trade. I'm a trader as well.
Yep.
And like you said, you have to be doing it full time. You have to be like consistently locked in, dialed in.
Yeah.
It's very convenient that I woke up like an hour before our call.
Yep.
I entered a trade like 30 minutes before our call. I'm up $1,800 using Quant. It's so nice.
Well, I mean, I have a huge position on some tech names, and I was down 200 grand yesterday. I'm up 140 today. So it's like it doesn't matter. I mean, it's all relative to the size that you're trading, right?
Yes.
But it's like one thing I do know is that even though I was used to at Geode Capital, which is a wholly owned Fidelity subsidiary, I set up their index advisory program when I was up there, and now that's the only business that Geode Capital does is they do all of the trading and tracking for all the passive index funds for Fidelity. So if you have any Fidelity Spartan funds, that's all managed by Geode. Now, anyway, when I was at Geode, we would routinely do billion-dollar programs at the end of the day, right? I mean, like literally thousands and thousands of orders, over $1 billion easy. And after all, you get used to it. You see the risks in terms of not the amount of money, but execution risk. Like, did you get all the symbols right? Did you make sure that all the deltas are right? Right. And, but
you're totally right. You're supposed to measure in like R, like 2R, 3R, 4R,
right.
Risk to reward. Yeah.
And the real problem is when you transition to trading with your own capital, it's a whole different game, right? Because the risks are more than just it goes to the bottom line, and even when you're doing institutional trading, I think very few people feel the gut punch that they get if they start losing money, right?
Of course, it's not your problem.
And there's nobody else to blame, right? That's the worst thing, is that there's nothing else to blame except yourself. So I think that's the one thing that once I left finance, you have to kind of get used to. It's wholly different, and then living with volatility is a whole different quagmire. So I know a lot of people can't handle it. They cannot handle big volatility. And in the beginning, I've had problems where I was doing options and futures trades. The volatility is like, you wake up and then you think it's going to get better, and then it just hits you on the backside of the head before you even know it, right? And it's something that you either grow a thick skin for, or you just can't handle it and you got to get out and do something else, right? And so I think those are the things, and volatility, the unexpected volatility is where a thesis helps. If you have a thesis to back it up and to follow and reread the reports that are coming out, look at the numbers that are coming out of that company, and it still aligns with your thesis, you have to stick to it, right? And that's where you counter the volatility and the fear and the gut punch of volatility, and try to smooth it out so that you don't panic.
We might have to do a part 2, man. This is very interesting.
Panic is a human thing. I can tell you.
Yeah.
There is no trader I've ever met who says like they're steely-eyed in every. No way.
No, yeah, I know people that make so much money trading, and they've been doing it for years, and they still it's so painful to be in drawdown. Even if it's 2% of your account, it's so painful. You want to just end it. Yeah, I get it.
Right. And it's like, I've gone from a week where I'm down $500,000 and I'm up $500,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the first time that happened with my own money, I'm like, oh crap, right? It's like,
no, it's horrible.
But now it's like, is my thesis holding? Is it good? And and over time, I've learned that I could trust my analysis on that. And I don't know about you, but the biggest money is not made by trading.
It's by investing. Swing. What I've seen, you could make some money day trading.
Right.
You can make a lot more money swing trading. And if you do month-to-month trading, that's when you can make a lot. I don't know about the whole investing over a long-term period. Maybe because I haven't even been around for a long-term period yet. So I don't know.
You're very reflective, which is great.
Yeah, maybe in the future. But tell me then, how do you make most of the money if it's not through trading?
If you look at the history of finance, the biggest money is you gotta create services or make something, right? And that's if you see the biggest the tech titans, who are they? They created something out of nothing, right? Or they outcompeted in something by creating new things in that particular market. So if you look at the most successful companies and people throughout history, they actually provided things that people needed. You have incredibly successful traders and trading companies, but you'll see that their upside is nothing compared to some of these business leaders that have created entire industries, right? So you'll see that disparity, that trading has almost a limit to how much you could. So think of trading as like a derivative, right? So you've heard of derivatives like futures, options, ETFs. There's a limited amount of money you can make off of derivatives, right? So it's the underlying that really creates, generates a lot of wealth. So I think when you explain it in those terms, people see how you accumulate capital in different categories, and then you just, it's more of like finding out which area you're good at, right? If you're good at inventing new companies for services that people need, that's great. Do it, right? Because that's probably going to give you the best upside more than trying to be a day trader and work your way up into a hedge fund trader, right? It's just that's going to give you a really good payout if you're really, really good. But all I could tell you is that in finance, you have some of the cleverest people all trying to stab each other. So where, and you have to be really, really good and on your toes. And I think more than half the stress in professional finance comes from working with other people like that, right? It's just that, do you trust them? Do they want your job? Where's your future? After 40, your clock is limited in any institution, right? If you're not bringing in the bacon, you're going to expire very quickly, right?
That's what I tell my audience too regarding trading. It's like make your money trading. Try to make 6 figures trading, and then after that, enter politics. Be an entrepreneur. Be like a content creator. Like do something, because it's not only that you can make a lot of money trading, but like you're kind of a useless member of society. Like you need to provide value for other people. Once you make your original sum of money, you need to provide some value to society, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I love trading. The environment, it's like very intense, right? It's like you got to be on. So when I moved to the Chicago area about 20 years ago, I tell my kids I was at the trading desk at 6:30 in the morning, and they look at me like, what? They can't believe that I would get up at 5 to get to my desk at work at 6:30 and be ready. And I'm like, I did that for 15 years straight, right? And then that's it's a very, very competitive environment, but you also feel this sometimes you end up at a good place where you have this camaraderie and a team approach. And when you get certain things done, it feels really cool, it's something that I've never seen anywhere else. I'm sure that you see it in tight teams anywhere, right? That are trying to execute something very, very sophisticated. And, I do miss that. I do miss that camaraderie and teamwork and being able to lead a team to do things. I mean, when I was at my last job, which was Magnetar Capital out in Evanston, we had this problem with whole soft dollars. And I don't know if you know what soft dollars are. No? So let's say you are a lot of these companies, they have analysts, right? Research analysts. And they create quarterly reports on all the companies that they follow. Those reports aren't free. So you will never see most of those reports as a private trader. You have to be another institution that pays them with commissions in order for you to get access to some of those reports, because those analysts get access to those company meetings, and they get access to investor day, where they could go directly to the board and ask them questions, like the CEO and the CFO. And then they'll take that and create a report on the outlook of the company. And some of the analysts are actually pretty good, right? So it's actually valuable to get those reports and read it. And but the thing is, how do you feed a good analyst company when they're looking for commissions, and you can't do trading with them because their systems are not up to spec, right? So they can't handle your business, but they happen to have a good research team, right? And so in the industry, that's called soft dollars. It's like you'll do most of your trading with somebody who's really, really good at handling all these complex trades, and then you'll say, hey, but we're gonna allocate some of the commission that I pay you into soft dollars, right? And so let's say I pay you 2 cents a share. You go, take half a penny a share, put it into my soft dollar account. And then you'll say, hey, I'm going to take that soft dollar, sprinkle it around some of these tiny brokerages that have really good analysts so that I could get some of their reports, right? And I instituted like a entire soft dollar program where I think it was the first one to be done. I was working with a company called ITG, who was one of our primary brokers, and they had really good systems. And I said, hey, I want to build this system because I have too many brokers to feed, and I could only send it to a few brokers who could actually handle the trades. And I want to systematize it so that I could feed these guys systematically. And we built it. I helped ITG actually build it, test it, refine it. And they were like, this is fantastic. I'm like, do whatever you want with it, just solve my problem, right? Little did I know, within a few years, that was like an entire sub-industry of brokerage. And it turned into careers for a lot of people on Wall Street to develop the software distribution system. And I got my problem solved because that was a problem I was having every day, right? In order to do my job as head trader for Magnetar, I had to solve that problem. But I can't take any kind of like stake in that because I work for a company. But the broker who helped me, they built it into an entire business. Other brokers followed suit, and now there's an entire soft dollar distribution industry. And so I know how to build systems and how to solve problems, and that's where a lot of the value plays come in within the finance world. Is that these are things you don't even consider or never even occur to you that it's a problem, right? Until people figure out this is how you get fed, this is how your paycheck comes from, right? And so this is plumbing that nobody really ever sees except if you're deeply ingrained in that business.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any educational resources you would recommend for aspiring quants?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think with the advent of these LLM models, you're gonna, I don't even, my kids are in college right now, and I would say that, you could probably get just as good an education or better if you were curious enough about a topic through all of these LLMs. You just have to know how to ask the questions, right? And there is so much content on the web, whether it's YouTube or podcasts like yourselves, and I think the only thing limiting people now from gaining, education is their willpower and curiosity. I think if they're curious, there's enough material out there that you can self-teach. I think college is still valuable because society expects it, and the institutions that generally have nice jobs require it.
It's mostly useful just for the connections you make, like 90%.
Yes, and
Going to a nice school, like you meet these people that think like 100 grand is nothing. These kinds of people, you would want to meet them at college. I think that's one of the most important features of it. Would you agree?
It's a brand, right? I mean, college degrees to a certain point is not just the education that you get. It's an experience and a brand. And I don't care what anybody says, but people they're brand conscious, right?
I put Harvard on my LinkedIn. I did not go to Harvard.
They are absolutely brand conscious.
Yes.
And they will buy brands because that's just the way people are, right? And that's why we have luxury brands. Even though it may look horrible on somebody, they'll still wear it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for educational purposes, now I think you mentioned something in the beginning that there's a lot of courses. Like if you want to do trading, there's a million courses. I think that's where you get a little bit, you could get jaded if you pick some of the wrong stuff to follow, because you have to kind of learn how to differentiate between just somebody just trying to sell you, like the old real estate plays, right? These guys have the airtight way of flipping real estate, and you could be building wealth within 2 years, if you do this, and there's a million courses like that for real estate trading and whatever you want to find it, and you just have to know that those things exist and why they exist. And I would just suggest to people to look at the fundamentals first and try to master the fundamentals, right? Learn what a debt is, what collateral is, what a prime rate is before you do anything, right? Because if you don't know the fundamentals, you're going to just get yourself into trouble.
All said. So no, should you buy a course from the guy with a Bugatti telling people if you sign up, you'll make $1,000 a day right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly appealing. It's constructed to be appealing, but if you look under them, most of them are almost like, have you ever used a fax machine? A physical fax machine?
No, I have not.
So there used to be this thing back in the 90s, right? When I first started working for a brokerage, writing systems, that, everybody had fax machines, and you would get these faxes overnight that was purported to be research reports and stock picks, right? And then, one firm would continue sending one report after another once a week or twice a week. And gosh, you look at those and you're like, wow, they're picking all winners. This is great, right? And then like after the 10th week, they'll call you, and then they'll like, hey, you've been getting our free research. You see how good we are, and we have a boutique subscription service, right? So would you like to subscribe to our analyst research for like, $1,000 a month? Back then, that's a lot of money, right? And those are all kind of bias schemes, right? So they put out 50% pick this, 50% pick that. And then after 10 weeks, they have like 5 or 6 clients that have all winners. And that's who they target. And I think some variant of that still goes on the internet, and it's just a lot faster. But it's usually there's a mechanical scheme behind it, whether it's, you're getting fresh money into your pools by dangling something that looks shiny, but it's not exactly, and then they'll take the 1 or 2 winners in your system and highlight them as success stories, and you could become one of these too. But they don't talk about the 95% that fail, right? And add to their success. So, you have this whole scheme about trading against book A and book B. Come on, that's terrible.
I spoke recently to a guy that runs a prop firm.
Yeah.
Very honest guy. He basically admitted every single prop firm, it's all B-book, and the only way they make money is just making sure that most of their clients just can't trade. They're bad at trading.
Right.
And none of them will admit this, but the only way they make money is when people lose.
And so, I think that's just, you've built a little trap for something that you're statistically, you've done the analysis and said, hey, most people are losing traders, and I'm going to take the other side, right? And I don't know, that's a way to make money and give some hope to some people, but I don't know. You have to be that kind of person. You have to be, that feel good. Hey, there's nothing wrong with payday loans, right? But is that something that you're gonna put your head to it and really make a big business out of it? It takes a certain type of investor and operator to go into that kind of business, right? And if I have a preference, that's not my cup of tea, right? And it's just they're doing a business, they serve a need. It's your determination whether that's something for you or not.
Right.
I don't think you want to judge anybody because, hey, everybody needs to make a living, right?
At the end of the day, you are providing a valuable service. Like, a lot of people make a lot of money with prop firms. I have a friend that became a full-time trader starting from prop firms. But like you said, it's not ideal for the average person. Well, the trading isn't in general, though.
No, and very few succeed. Very few succeed. I mean, I would love to give people like, hey, this is the percentage that actually succeed. Like if you show aspiring high school athletes that your probability of succeeding at the top level of your sport is this, they may actually take an extra course or two while in college, right? Because like along the way, yeah, you may be really good, but there's injury risk, there's all of this stuff, right? And so I think it's great to have that, like be the NBA star or be the NFL star, but how many really are there, right? There's very few from the millions that train for it every day, right? And so I think you got to look at the numbers and say, hey, if you haven't been extraordinarily gifted in athletics since you were like in middle school, your chances of becoming the world's fastest person on the Olympic track is like nil.
Well, do you consider yourself extraordinarily gifted when it comes to trading? What's your IQ?
I never considered myself a very like competitive, smart person. What I do know about myself over the years is that I do want to find out about the fundamentals of anything, like how something actually works, right? And I do know the value of understanding the fundamentals to a point where you know how much truth there is to it and what are its weaknesses. Now, because once you master the fundamentals, after a while, you could start playing with it, right? And you could start looking at different variations of it. And that's where creativity comes in. So one thing over the years I found that I'm pretty good at is dynamical systems within computers. So dynamical systems is like most computer systems are static. They'll say, hey, you go, hey, let me see all my trades that are working. It's just going to a database, bringing it up on a nice web sheet, and then doing some analysis on it and plugging in real-time data. But when systems change over time and you need to do these dynamical system analysis, I've learned that I'm actually pretty good at that. And that's where I started thinking about data and privacy. And that started probably like around 2013. And I started looking at how to secure data for your own uses under your own control as a dynamic system. And that becomes a whole different methodology and approach. Because I think right now a lot of our cybersecurity and privacy features are too static. And they don't take into account how people actually use and save data throughout their lifetimes.
Mm-hmm. You got a lot of military and government grants.
So yes, we have a couple of like 2 or 3 Air Force SBIRs. Those are called Small Business Innovation Research Grants, which the whole SBIR program was just reauthorized last month, I believe. So that's starting again. But, the U.S. federal government has an incredible program to stimulate small businesses that are innovative, because they know that that's the only way to keep an economy current and fresh with new ideas, and they could also get access to it, by helping, right?
So when the U.S. military gives you a grant, do they like own a part of your business, or do they like have unique access to it?
No, they typically, when you have a SBIR, you basically, if you accept the defaults, usually if anything comes out of it that's useful to them, they'll get like very, very permissive licensing off of your technology, right? And so that's the trade-off that you do. You go, hey, I want grants, and they'll give it to you if they think it's worthy, but then you may owe them kind of like license-free, fee-free licenses for a while, right? And the difference is that if you bring in your own intellectual property, then it's a different story, right? Because if you could prove you have intellectual property to begin with, and that this may be of interest to you, then you could always negotiate something if they want to go further with it. So yeah, I mean, we did Air Force grants, we did a couple of Navy ones, I believe, and then we ended up putting one in for the NIST, and I don't know, the National Institute of Standards and Technology that operates under the Department of Commerce. So the NIST is like a national lab. They cover almost all the basic science fields, and including measurement and analysis, chemicals, building materials, and cryptography and cybersecurity.
How do you get into a position where the military is like, take my money? How does someone get there?
Anybody can do it. It's just you got to know. They have sites called cyber.gov or whatever. There's like at least half a dozen sites that the U.S. puts up where any participant, and globally, you could go into those websites, see the things that they're looking for, the deadlines. They tell you exactly how to submit an application with your ideas. And, that it's, I've encountered firms. Now, think about this. There are firms that are sitting outside of the U.S. that help small businesses in the U.S. that are innovative to prepare these applications on behalf of the U.S. government. These are foreign firms that specialize in the process of putting in applications for these programs for you. And they'll take a big fee, right? And so I've seen this, and you go, wow, that's bizarre, right? These people are foreigners taking money from small businesses in order to prepare them for application processing in the country that they live in. So something is wrong with that process. But anyway.
Where are these countries? Like, where are they based, these foreigners?
Oh, some of them are in Canada, others are in Israel, in Europe. They are all over the place. You have plenty in the U.S. as well.
So there are like Israeli firms and Canadian firms that are helping you get U.S. military grants as an American.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and when I first encountered it, you scratch your head. You're like, how does this make sense? But it exists, So, like we said, there are these niches of businesses that people don't even know exist, and this is another example of it. It's a niche. So, why do these firms pop up? It's because sometimes, like you were asking, how did you ever find out about how do you get involved with these types of things with the federal government or the military? And that's where you get this, who are the people who do the acquisition process for the military? There's literally hundreds of people who deal with that, right? And they churn them out. Every 2-3 years, these people are not lifetime career people in that area. They do their duty cycle and they go to something else, right? But those that retire after doing that or get, honorably discharged, their expertise in military acquisitions. So what they do is they either join a firm like a big defense prime, like the Lockheeds, the Raytheons, and they become a sales guy, or they become the one who puts in the proposals on behalf of these big guys. The ones who are more entrepreneurial, they'll say, I want to help the little guys, and they'll use their network connections and their know-how of how to prepare and submit applications that may be deemed favorable, right? So you'll see that's how these industries persist, is that because you now have people within the insides who get out of that system and they need something to do, and this is a career path for them.
So would you say that it's important for you when you're applying for a U.S. grant from the military to speak to somebody that was actually inside of that system or is currently inside right now, I feel like the best way to do it is if you know a guy. Hey, Bob, I know you're helping companies get grants. I'm going to apply for a grant. Can you look over this? I feel like a lot of that happens, right?
I believe a lot of that happens.
Is that legal?
Nobody will admit to it, right? Because that's not allowed.
Right.
But generally, you will see a lot of companies. Well, I mean, if you look at the lobby, the amount of money that they put into the lobby in DC by these defense industrial primes, it's like it's unbelievable, right? And what do you think they're doing, right? They are continuing to network. They hire people from the military who came out, and they know people that have fresh network connections, and they'll keep that alive, right? And they'll get an appointment or a hearing that's more personable, more priority than just somebody who's just coming in from the cold with just an application through their portal. It's going to be treated differently.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? One of the things that is really, really interesting is that you look at some of these RFPs, requests for proposals, right? And they come out every year, multiple times during the year. And some of them, you look at it and you're like, it's so detailed and so specific. It's like, it's almost like the actual vendor wrote it for themselves. Okay. So I don't know how much you've dealt with institutional HR, right? But if you go to a big company and they're looking to hire somebody in a very, mid to senior position, most employment law requirements is that you gotta have that vacancy publicly available for like a couple of weeks or something, right? And what'll happen is that you will see that thing. You'll see that announcement on a public, website or newspaper or whatever. In the old days, it was the classifieds, right? For legal reasons, but they've already picked the person, right? They already know, right? And so a lot of times you'll see the qualifications or things that they require, and it fits perfectly the person they already picked. So
how much of these government grants and military contracts do you think are due to either nepotism or lobbying or something in that area?
You know what? I
don't want to get you in trouble, by the way. You don't have to answer that.
No. I went in and thinking, merit, best technology, best ideas, determination. But that counts for, let's say, I would say a quarter of success.
Wow.
And the reason I say is not my personal experience, is I actually went to a Navy conference, a conference done by a Navy, and they had the head of that particular division's, he was the head acquisition officer. And you know what? He got to the top of the speaker's podium, and he sat down, and he's like, most of the stuff that we do is all relationship based. I'm like, what did he just say? I'm like, and you know what? He was being brutally honest, and that is, unfortunately, that kind of popped my bubble in terms of what I thought was going on, and you kind of learn, right, that is the reality. You hate to think that is the only way, but a lot of that goes on. And I think it goes on in all parts of society. It's just you can't, and no matter the government, military, whatever, it's run by people.
Exactly, yeah.
And you cannot, there's a way of doing business that reduces risk sometimes, or hinders advancement, right? But it's how people work. It's how people work in a social setting, and I don't think you can get away from it.
I think the concept of the American economy is, ostensibly it is merit-based.
Yep.
But if you look at psychology, look at any single country in the world, look at Russia, Korea, Japan, anywhere in Europe, especially, I don't even want to talk about South America. Like, it's all nepotism, connections, helping other people out, right? I wanted to ask you, when you were raising money from the government and you were filling out all these contracts and you were like filling out like forms and forms and forms, is there something you think you did unique that other people don't? My question is essentially, can you give us like a guide on how to get money from the government?
Well, I mean, there's many ways. I think if you have something that you say is something that's unique or revolutionary or major improvement, you could write up a proposal. There's many grant systems that they have and grant programs. And, the Small Business Innovation Research Grant, I believe, is congressionally mandated. So the way they work is that they know that the bulk of government funding for research and development are going to go to the big companies and the big academic institutions, right? So not only do they have like funding for the MITs and Caltechs and Stanfords of the world, because, they would not be the type of institutions that you know them by reputation if they did not have government funding. They get a lot of funding from the National Science Foundation, NSF. What do you think they are, right? That's most science, STEM, areas, professors. That's where they get most of their grants from, is from the NSF.
Is this idea of a free market kind of not 100% correct because the government funds most of the big projects anyways?
Well, I think there's two things here. Is that one, why did they start doing that in the first place? I think one of the things that you start doing that is after like World War I and World War II, they realized that superior technology is going to be a defining factor in how you protect your country, right? And I think maybe the biggest intellectual property swap deal that they've ever had that changed the tide of the war was, what do you think it was?
Some like radio, like cracking some encryption thing, right?
That's the Enigma program, but it was radar. The ability to see in the dark and through clouds, right? Whether your enemy is coming through air, right? And I believe the Brits really revolutionized radar, but they were dying, right? They were starving because they were constantly being bombarded by Germany, and they had this super duper technology, but nobody was helping them because they were all conquered, right? And so when they were talking to the U.S., I believe they made a deal that they're going to share all their radar, goodies with the U.S. in return for, logistics support, right? Like sending them food. And this is way before we ever entered into the wars. Is the food, that we were sending there, and the energy supplies to support them and prop them up. But I think that kind of like started this whole program of we gotta fund technology research because it changes things. And from there on, you've seen the atom bomb. There was a race for that. There's the rockets, right? The V2 rockets. I think there's some historical things that talk about it, but where did NASA come from? How did we send people to the moon in the first place? Who do you think those people were? Have you heard of the Wernher von Braun, the first kind of leader of NASA?
Wasn't he German?
He was a Nazi V2 scientist. So like I think when the West and East were going at it to get into Germany, apparently there was a race between the Russian troops and the American troops to get to those V2 scientists first
Yeah,
and take them back home.
it's so funny. It was actually, yeah, Russians and Americans fighting over which Germans can get them to the moon first.
Right. So if you think about it, that's how I think all of this happened, is that the government realized, hey, we weren't in that business, but we gotta stimulate people to really do, fundamental research and development to create those advantages, right? And I think it just grew from that realization that a lot of good ideas doesn't just come from big efforts, but it comes from individuals and small groups that have insights, but they need an outlet to be able to be sponsored to some level so that they could work on it, right? And so I think that's the motivation behind this. So there's a lot of doors for civilians, regular civilians, to do put in for these grants. And a lot of them are very permissive and they're very open. But then you got to do your work. You have to network within that segment, within that particular area of the military or the federal space. And that's where, you have to decide that you're going to become a business and have salespeople and networking people and be able to do that. Obviously, the big defense industrial based companies, they completely institutionalized that, right? They're the ones hiring ex-generals, ex-colonels, top acquisition officers, and so they have the wherewithal to be able to network into the highest places.
So a lot of these really large companies we see right now, originally they were funded, or at least they got some money from these government agencies. Like, I think Palantir got money from In-Q-Tel, which is CIA. I think Google Earth got money as well from In-Q-Tel, which was, CIA.
Hey, talk about AI. Where do you think all of that fundamental research came from?
I haven't researched too much into that. So what is the story behind AI and the government?
Most high-level academic research has some level of federal funding involved. And that may be decades old, but it's there. And somebody was fed through an academic institution or a quasi-academic institution to be able to do that kind of research, right? And so largely AI, big chunks of the foundational material for it has been funded by National Science Foundation grants and other military grants throughout the last few decades. It's huge. And that's why, when you have this latest controversy with Anthropic, it's why don't you just search in your own LLM about where you got your technology in the first place, right? I mean, I think there is an ethical and moral way to apply AI for the defense of your country and safeguarding your citizens. I don't think that our adversaries will ever even raise that question.
So hypothetically, let's say someone is against the Iran war and they want to make a difference, in the world. Is the solution to still kind of become a government contractor and to still rise up the ranks and get to a point where they can make decisions rather than just kind of doing nothing, saying this is bad? Because what I tell my audience a lot is at the end of the day, if you have certain political opinions, the only way you can make a difference is if you get into these elite institutions, if you get into this position of power and make a difference by becoming someone who's able to, impact things. Would you say that that's the only way that people can make a difference, or is there an option to just kind of be like an influencer and just say, hey, this is bad, don't do this?
I think that's the beauty of a free society, right? To the extent that you believe that we're free, I think we're freer than most of the world. And we tolerate the most extreme differences within our own peoples than most societies. I don't know if you've lived elsewhere, but most societies are culturally very homogenous, and they're not very accepting of major differences, right? And so I think you got to kind of step back and realize what you have. It's whatever we're doing is not perfect. You're never going to agree on 100% of what's going on, but I think one of the problems of what you're saying is that is the only way is to get into a position of power. But the way our political system works is position of power is not just given to you, but it's like you have to do what some of the people who put you into power want you to do, right? So I think there's always that human element, and but in the end, if there is something really egregious, I think we've seen that people do vote, every year, and that the votes do change how politicians act, how people in power actually act. And I think that's good. I mean, unfortunately, we're in this situation where it's like a cat and dog fighting all the time, and very little seems to get done congressionally. But times change. I mean, it's not like it's very different from where it was 10 years ago, and I'm sure 10 years from now it's going to be very different again. So I think for like kids my age, kids like my kids' age is like they think everything lasts forever, right? And I'm like, no, it's just that's why we have elections every 4 years for president. That's why we have elections every year for all these other officials, and that's how change is done. It's done incrementally, and it does change though, and it does reflect what the population wants to do eventually.
Mm-hmm. What are you building now after you've, gotten these contracts, after you've worked as a quant, as a trader? What's the next step? What are you building with Bolts right now?
So Bolts is a spin-off startup from Nuts Technologies, which is the one that I started back around 2016. I spent about 3 years researching how I could put together a better, more secure system for myself, like securing my own data and moving it around my own equipment. And it turned out that there was not much you could buy and piece together that actually worked, even though I thought I was pretty advanced in technology. And so it started me asking some questions. What's wrong with this? We have some really, really cool looking devices. We have tablets, we have smartphones. And why can't I move and protect my data the way I want to very easily? And I came to the conclusion that the way I want to protect my data and move it is not how the web has been built. So the web, if you look at all the big companies that are doing very well in the web, most of their business models is getting at your data, right? Collecting your data and exploiting it to generate revenues in ads or products or whatever it is, right? And so it's antithetical to their business model. Privacy is not part of their business model. It's like, as long as it's private to them, they don't care. They want your data, right? And it has value. And so I'm like, these are the people who are best resourced and experienced to produce the type of solution I want. But they're never going to do that because it's not how they make their money. And so at that point, I basically asked myself, hey, if you think you have a better solution, do you have any obligation to yourself or to society to try and do something about it? It kind of goes to your question about people in power, right? And that's about political power. This is about, hey, you think you have a better idea to help people protect their data better, but you don't see an environment where that's going to be fostered at all by the industry. And you have to do it alone. And so I think that was the decision that I made, was I'm going to take my time, put my own money into it to figure out if this goes anywhere and if I could actually produce something that's actually useful. And that's how Nuts started. After about 3 years of tinkering, I came out with these ideas. I implemented it into rough prototypes and had what I believe was a fairly complete solution for data security and data management.
So when I'm like talking on the phone and I say, I want to go to Florida, and then I see an advertisement, book your flight to Florida, this would be able to fix like privacy leak issues like that.
We have technology that if we integrate it the right way, we could deterministically remove spam between you and me all the time.
What do you mean by spam?
So you know how spam comes into your email or your texts? They come now through your Calendly and Outlook invites, right? They try to get in. If you set up through our NUT system a communication session between you and me or any number of individuals that I trust, they're in that communication session, whether it's chat, email, voice, document sharing, there is very, very slim possibility of anybody injecting spam into it or a phishing attack vector, right? And no email system in the world right now can guarantee you that. We can.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it powered by any AI tools, or how does it determine if it's spam?
None at all. It's just simple sort of what we feel computers are really, really good at. So one idea is that, check this out. Why do you get spam?
I put my website, or I put my email on some random website, single moms near me or something like that.
Right. So the main idea is that it's the same problem why celebrities and important people don't want their home address anywhere, right? Is that it's an advertisement of where you are. And that is our public email system, is anybody has access to your email address. Therefore, spammers, it's a welcome mat. Well, why don't we just use numbers, right? So what we do is we identify people with just pure numbers. And we've done this like over 10 years ago. And I think some of these new messaging systems are just barely touching upon it now. But we've had this idea and we've implemented it over 10 years ago, is that if I define my relationship with you as a really long number, and that's what we use, and that you and I reciprocate and exchange unique cryptographic key sets to do conversations within this thing, whether it's file transfers, email, or text, it's incredibly hard to first identify that channel number because it's just a number. Right? It's huge. Somebody would have to guess it. Second, they would have to now figure out the cryptographic keys that secure everything that you and I do.
Is this kind of like Signal except without phone numbers or usernames?
Absolutely. It is just like Signal. It's actually very insightful for you to bring that up, because what you see is you'll see like Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, and even in the secure email space, you'll see ProtonMail, right? And those types of products. Here's what I see over time is that the Signals of the world started with secure messaging. Then the next thing they wanted to do is do secure file sharing, right? And then they kind of stopped there because they don't really know what to do with it after that, right? And then you'll see ProtonMail started with secure emails, and then they started going into secure file sharing, right? And what we did was we said, what if you created a very secure container as a file, right? And did everything through that. So we started with file sharing, and in a very, very secure form where individual files are protected. And we figured out ways to do messaging and email and even live communications through these protected objects or files. And so for us, we've already solved that problem of file sharing after you do a texting, a secure chat session. We created file sharing first and then put messaging on top of that technology using the same files. So it's a very different way. It's an inside out kind of upside down type of look. And we found that it's what we call data-centric security. And it is a different way of looking at secure data objects. And we figured out ways to do this where it could service chats, emails, live communications, and obviously all of this underpinned by the ability to share files securely.
So if you're accessing this through an internet connection or through an iPhone or through like Firefox or something, even if the actual app itself is secure, isn't it only as secure as your iPhone is, which is always susceptible to malware, Pegasus, things like that?
Absolutely. You cannot secure, if for a dedicated adversary that's gunning for you, you cannot secure yourself from them.
I'm glad you're being honest right now, because a lot of people will say,
no, I mean, I'm not going to, that's the reality. If somebody wants to get you, they're going to get you, right? And there's no amount of protections you could do except throw out all your devices and don't touch them. What we do is that we know it's impossible to secure any one system from all attack vectors. So the way to protect is that you protect the collateral damage, right? And what you do is that if one person is compromised, don't let that compromise become a compromise of your whole system. Right? So it is.
How would that work?
So it's segmentation and isolation, so that what we do is that if you and I have a chat session that is isolated to you and me, and I would have a separate session, let's say with Maria, right? And that would be isolated between me and her. But if I'm attacked, the only vulnerable things on your side and on Maria's side is just the chat sessions that you have with me. That's it. So it's segregated, isolated. It becomes I'm the collateral damage, and that's it. And it doesn't really propagate any further.
How does that make it different than something like Signal?
Signal, I think, is good for messaging, but they know your phone number, so you're not really anonymous, right? And then, I think Signal does a lot of good stuff. They're not terribly efficient when you're working on group messaging. And then if you do like file sharing with Signal, you take it out of the Signal app, that file is no longer protected, right? So what that means is I've always had a problem where if I encrypt a file on my system and I send it to you, a lot of the times I'm going to have to send it to you with no protections because you may not have the same security features that I have, right? And so it's my content, but once it goes out of my system, it no longer has the protections I want on it, right? We changed that. If I send it to you in a nut capsule, that stays in that secure nut capsule the whole time. And that's the difference. Signal, ProtonMail, any of these platforms that try to go beyond their original premise of email security or chat security, and they go into file security, you'll see that their file security has to stay within their application system. It cannot be extended by sharing onto somebody else.
Who is your target audience with something like this, so secure and private? Are you worried that it's going to be used by like drug dealers and stuff like that?
No, you're bringing in something that is always a controversial issue, right? And that's the dual use nature of certain technologies. And that applies to cybersecurity features as well as weapon systems, right? It really depends on who's using it. And can you really control who may use it or not, right? And because you don't want somebody who's going to be using it in a bad way, do you start putting weak points into it, right? And I think those are types of the.
I wanted to ask you, actually, you don't have to answer this live, but I have a strong feeling that Signal has a backdoor from the government, and like a lot of people have spoken about it.
It may or may not. I can't attest to any of that in terms of whether I've looked into it or not. But it could be possible. I can't rule it out for good.
But I wanted to ask about, will you add a backdoor to your software for the government to prevent like any illicit activity? Because you've taken like government grants and military grants, do you feel like you need to add a backdoor?
Well, there's a big difference. We took grants because the government gave us grants because they saw something that might interest them. But all our technology was invented on private capital. And we have the proof of that, right? And so the government cannot dictate what you do with private inventions. That's already been cataloged by the U.S. Patent Office, right? And so our technology is so flexible that when you're talking about backdoors, right? We said, well, you know what? Maybe some organizations want that capability, a backdoor, right? And maybe some people don't. So what if we turn everything into a front door that can be customizable, right? So if you're running a company and you go, hey, no, I need a break glass scenario. I need to get into everybody's stuff on an emergency. We allow you to configure that specifically for your organization, right? But we don't put that in by default. You could configure that because that's how flexible our system is. And if you don't want that, you could restrict it and say for several objects or for the whole firm, there's no such thing as a backdoor.
Will that be publicly available information? Like, let's say you put this on the App Store. Will we know if there's a backdoor available?
Yes. You would absolutely know what types of keys have been configured for this and who is identified for these keys. So imagine we have a very, very secure object called the nut capsule. And I allow you to configure as many keyholes as you want, right? Now, if we receive a nut capsule from the web and I have no keys that I could identify that fit into any of these keyholes, we quarantine that sucker immediately. Because we go, hey, if I don't have any keys that could possibly open this thing, what good is it to me? And it could be a threat, right? So we don't even attempt to open it. We say quarantine this because it's probably spam or malware coming to you, or it doesn't even belong to you, right? So that's how we could reject any kind of, tricksters trying to put in fake messages into your system and things like that, is that it's going to be extremely difficult to first identify who you are, what channel you're talking on, and secondly, how to do the cryptography to inject any false messages in there. To do that much effort is going to take a lot of effort. And you have to be somebody incredibly important for somebody to target you at that level.
What would be the best way to stay anonymous when you are someone incredibly important that's being targeted like that?
I think you use our system, because our system will never ask you for anything that's identifiable if you don't want to.
Do you think, obviously this is up to you, do you think you can add like a little thing that says, warning, someone is trying to backdoor you, or like something like that?
Yeah, we have, you have the ability with our nut capsules to actually analyze a structure and say, hey, you didn't put these keyholes in there. What is this about, right? So you can see if somebody's trying to get at it, and if somebody's trying to tamper your data, you also know it, because everything about this nut capsule is cryptographic. Now, one of the nice things is that when we built this technology, I needed technology that could change cryptography at the file level dynamically when I needed to, right? So that I could have two nut capsules sitting on my disk drive side by side that can choose different cryptographies to protect the contents of it. Now, that type of technology did not exist when I started this project. So I decided to create that. And the technology that enables it is, we call it now QFlex. It's a protocol. It's a protocol that allows you to create secure messages with a little bit of instruction in it that says how that secure message was produced, right? And that QFlex is the basis of our spin-off company called Boltz Technologies. Because we showed QFlex to the NIST cryptographers at the end of the project. They loved it. They said they didn't think per message cryptographic transitions were possible, and they wanted to see it being done. So we showed it to them over 6 months. We took all of their post-quantum cryptography algos that they were proposing, stuck them all into our working QFlex model, and showed it to them that we could change cryptography per message, like instantly. And they loved it. And at the end of the project, and these are the cryptographers selecting post-quantum cryptography algos, right? He said, "Hey, have you guys looked at blockchain?" And we're like, "No, we're all about like data security and data-centric security." And you go, "Well, your QFlex might actually help blockchains. You might want to take a look." So we took that, we started researching what blockchains and how they worked, and oh my goodness, a blockchain transaction is a QFlex message, right? And so a blockchain transaction happens to be a subset of what a QFlex message is. And so we did a little research. We went back to our original investors and said, "Hey, we got this great idea that came out from the NIST project, and it's to set up a spin-off company that takes QFlex and directs it for commercializing QFlex to help blockchains combat the threats of quantum advancements," right? And so we started doing that. We incorporated the spin-off in about 12 months ago, and we've been trying to get in front of any and all blockchains who will listen to us or hear us out. And we finally found one late last summer. We got introduced to the people at the Canton Network. So have you heard of the Canton Network? So they're kind of an alternative blockchain. They're really trying to get TradFi onto their network to do institutional type finance activities. And we talked to them, and they were actually very curious to listen to what we had to say. We showed them a demonstration of what QFlex can do for them. And they saw the light in terms of like what we were actually proposing is a paradigm shift of how blockchains work. So if you think about it, so can I make a bold guess that you've traded in crypto, right? So when my kids were in high school, one time they complained. They said, "Hey, how come like we're not allowed to bring our own locks for the lockers? Like the school has to give you the lock, right?" And that's because they got the little key in there, right? And I'm like, because they need to get into people's things every once in a while, and they didn't like it. But that's the state of blockchain as it is today, with elliptic curve cryptography is.
Remember when Iran took a bunch of crypto
Yeah.
in USDT and they just froze it completely?
Yeah. And so, the problem is when you're on Bitcoin, when you're on Ethereum, when you're on Solana, right now, you're locked into whatever lock they permit you to use, which is just one kind, right? And that's been the major problem, is that when you see quantum advances, these locks can be broken, and that's what they're scared of. What we're proposing is that give the control of what type of lock, how many locks you want to put onto a particular transaction to the user at the wallet level. So bring your own locks, choose your own locks. On a per transaction, you could determine what type of lock you want. The blockchain itself is freed from choosing locks, which means that you can never have this problem with the blockchain because new cryptography comes along, because we're changing cryptography on a per transaction basis if you wanted to. Therefore, you're turning this static problem into a dynamic problem, right? So remember I told you that I found that I was really good with dynamic problem sets within computer systems? This is an example. Let the user have whatever they want, whenever they want. Let the blockchain handle all of that, and you no longer have that problem. But we've changed the power dynamic and the entire security dynamic of how blockchains work. And so I think Canton saw that as a really nice capability that they would like to see if it was possible. That's why we engaged them in a pilot. And I think that's a significant change of blockchain architectures. That's never been the case. Like, think about it. Why would you have the same level of protection for $100 asset in your wallet versus $100 million asset? Why? Right? Doesn't make sense. You'd never do that in real life. You'd want to put extra protections on the 100 million one, right? Same thing. It's like, you got to give that choice and risk tolerance to the user. It's their asset. They should have a say, not the blockchain. And so, we're offering that type of change of paradigm of how the blockchains work. And that's what Boltz is offering as a solution. And we're finding that because of our proprietary nature, because we have all of these patents around it, that we're gaining a better hearing from people who come from traditional finance, because TradFi has no problem paying license fees or anything that's proprietary, because that's been the way of doing business forever, right? It's only like the hardcore blockchain systems where there's this notion that everything has to be open sourced, right? For it to be safe. And, I think you can make cases for that's true and that's not true. Because you've heard of these attacks where they get into GitHub, they change an open source software mysteriously, and then a lot of systems get hacked because people automatically take those updates and they incorporate it into their systems in their next build. And there's not enough people and eyes to check that everything is kosher, right? And that's how that's called a supply chain attack.
How would people be able to know what you're saying is true? Is it based on your word if it's not open source?
No, for Canton, we would work out, if they want to go forth with it, we would definitely work out something where it's like an open source with restrictions. So it's like, the Gemini, the Llama models from Meta.
Mm-hmm.
They were basically open source with restrictions, right? It's like you could use it for certain purposes, but you can't use it without licensing for other purposes. And so we would do something like that probably to make sure that participants on Canton get access to the source code for QFlex. But if you're trying to use it elsewhere, they can't. They would have to talk to us first and figure out an agreement. But I think that's all workable. That's not something that is a showstopper, What is stopping from China that doesn't respect patent laws at all to just take what you're making open source and make their own? Nothing. But the main problem is who's going to use it, right? So if China's trying to do that for their own companies that are doing only business in China, I don't even know if you could hire a legitimate lawyer to go out there and argue your case, right? But if a Chinese business wants to do cross-border transactions with a foreign business, foreign businesses actually want to comply with patent laws and licensing, and they may not want to do business with the Chinese guy because it's like they're using infringing technology. And so I think that's the kind of stuff that you have to deal with if you're doing this, right? That no, nothing stops them. But we do have a Chinese patent, so I don't know how effective that's going to be, but we got one. We have one in the Russian and in the 7 countries that follow the Russian patent system as well.
Right. Russia famously follows patent laws.
You know what we found very interesting, which you might find interesting, is that we had Russian patent application and the Israeli another Israeli patent application pending at the same time, and each time there was a regional conflict that started. So the Ukraine invasion and then the Gaza conflict. We saw the patent offices expedite everything. So, because expediting means that, you get more fees, right? Every time you do an event.
Oh.
Right. So I almost saw like, oh, there's all these sanctions. So we had I think our law firm in DC, they hired like a local agent who was Russian lawyers to deal with the Russian patent to prosecute it. And then all of a sudden I get a call from our lawyers and going, hey, we're going to have to change agents. I'm like, why? And they're like, well, because of this Ukraine thing, there's all these sanctions of sending money to our local agents. So they found a Swiss agent who could do Russian patent prosecutions, and then we had to switch our local agent to a Swiss agent. So it was actually, I was like, oh, that's actually affecting me too. It's like, it was very bizarre to see that. But, you do see these little things where once a country is in kind of an emergency state, they start doing things to get more cash into their government, right, as quickly as possible. And I think we actually saw that in these 2 cases,
So immediately, as soon as the conflict started, they expedited it and you were able to secure the patents.
Well, we got office actions faster. So it's like office action is a rejection, right? And you could get multiple rejections, and they were being done faster. That's what we saw. It was like they were being, more proactive because each one requires fees. And so we could see them actually doing this. Yeah.
When you're working with the military and with the government, what is like a weird interaction that you've had that you never really expected to have? Something unusual, unexpected?
Well, there's 2 things. There's one thing is that it's very hard to understand for somebody coming in from the outside how the military functions, right? Especially when it comes to R&D and acquisitions. So I don't know if it's changing nowadays, but the way that it's been set up for the last few years is that the people who form the acquisition of technology are not the same people who use it, and they're not the same people who procure it as an R&D project. So it's like you're dealing with 3 different groups that sometimes don't even talk to each other, right? And the same level of expertise does not exist in all 3 groups. And that's, once you start realizing that, that's why you need like a network of people who work for you, who could interface with all 3 of them and coordinate, because you're dealing with multiple, departments with different people who have different career tracks within the government and within the military, and they may be so out of touch with your project, except they know that they have to do certain things by certain times. And so it's a very weird system. And that's one of the weirdest things to find out, is that there's not like one person that says, this is the research and technology problem we have to solve. This is who it's going to be used by, and then, this is how we're going to try to attempt to acquire it. There's a lot of disconnects within that logical stream. And once you start realizing it's not the same persons, it's not the same knowledge level, you're like surprised, right? And you have no idea why certain things are done that way, but that's the way they operate, And I believe that a lot of the government operates that way, where you have, and then add to that a lot of these, people in the military, they have 2-3 year duty cycles, right? So they'll do a job for 2 or 3 years. Sometimes they'll stay in that job and move up higher, or they'll go to some other place, right? And learn a new skill. So there's very little continuity, and we've seen that people just rotate out, or they retire out, and you don't hear from them ever again. So there's a lot of bridge building that you got to do continually because of the rotational system of the military.
For the people watching this right now, this is the crazy sauce right here. No one else is going to tell you how to get consistent government connections and contracts like this.
You need dedicated, to do it right, you need dedicated people working on it all the time. And that's what, the big defense industrial based players, they call them the prime contractors. They're expert at. They're absolute experts at that. And that's why most of them live there in the DC area.
What really stuck out to me the most about this interview is when I asked you, should people rise up the ranks so that at some point they get into a position of power to change whatever they want to change? And you told me, even if you get put into a position of power, you have to do what the people who put you there told you to do. Does that, at some point, you have to become the person that puts other people in?
Oh, there's no doubt you change through that process. I think anybody who says they're going to be the same person is like lying to you. They don't even know better. I think I've seen enough where if you're in an environment for several years, you get molded by that environment without even knowing it. And I think that if you rise to that level of power, you have been changed and you may not even realize it. This is like when you look at your youthful self, 20 years later, you go, how did I ever think that way? And it's the same thing, right? Things change. The change that you never realize is happening is change on a day-to-day basis, because it happens in tiny increments that you never notice until a long time has passed. And you go, who is that person, right? And so I think it is incredibly hard to say that you're going to be the same politician at a high level than when you first started. And we see that over and over again, right? That people get into Congress, fresh blood, fresh voices, give them 3 years, and then guess what? They start sounding the same, right? they drink the Kool-Aid of whatever party that they're in, and then the cycle starts again. So I think it's just inevitable that if you're in a group dynamic in a social setting, that leadership requires you to reflect those that will support you at that leadership position. And that's I think sometimes it's a survival instinct. Sometimes it's like an alpha type ego thing where you want to be that leader, but much worse than why you got into that business in the first place, right? So you go, I want to lead, but then you don't do that calculus of like, is this why I came into this in the first place? And so, because they may not gel, right? Because if you go back to your original stance, you may not be able to say that you're going to be able to lead anymore, right?
Right. You're saying I don't want to put words in your mouth. A lot of people lose their soul in the process, basically. I'm not putting that into your mouth, of course.
I don't, yeah, I wouldn't say soul because that kind of has negative connotations, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would say that people always change. You and I change, even through this conversation. You're giving me new information and insights. I'm giving you some information and insights, and we're both being changed, right? And so I think that's just a natural way we evolve, right? And we absorb things as we interact with each other. So I don't say it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I think it's just a natural thing. But there's a place in my heart that says that small group of people, even individuals, if they have a vision, you can make a difference. You just have to be lucky enough to be able to put yourself into a position to do something about it, right?
That's what I wanted to hear.
And, if you have that chance, you should do it and follow your pure vision. Because especially in the area of technology, there is so much untapped technology problems that can be done, even by individuals, that you can make a difference. It's just that you got to make a living doing it.
I feel like a lot of people, they get into Congress and they don't have money. Like, how are you going to live off of the amount that you make? You need to accept money from some donors, from some lobbyists. You know what I mean?
Hey, you know what? That used to be the case, right? I mean, look at Churchill. He had patrons.
Yeah.
That gave him stipends, right? And that was the way of doing politics. It's only modern times that that's been considered bad, and but that's been replaced with super PACs and corporate money and all of these other things, or after office things like writing books and things like that, or speaking tours, right? It's just like there's always a payer and a sponsor at some point, whether it's delayed gratification or whatnot. But you can't just it's everybody needs something to live on, right? And I think that was I think prior to, was it Wilson or somebody like that, the president had no pension. Most presidents, as soon as they left office, they were poor because they had no other skill sets beyond like becoming a lawyer again or whatever. But it's just like you can't. There was no pension. I believe it's who was the guy who dropped the bomb on Japan? It was right after Roosevelt.
You're putting me in a bad spot. I can't remember either.
Yeah, he's a very mild-mannered looking guy. I know his face. I don't have his name. But it was his constant whining to the press that he's
Truman.
I think he's the guy who because of his constant public, comment that presidents should not have to be like, groveling for money or figuring out how to make a living, that eventually Congress set up this pension system for presidents. But before then, there was nothing. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a perennial problem. There's nothing that you could do about it. I think it's just a human thing. I don't care what people say, but to some degree, earning a living is important because nothing in this society is free, right? And you have to be able to take care of that first and foremost for your family, and even if not just for yourself, right?
100%. Before you try to make any difference, you need to make sure you can eat the next day,
Right. And getting that support is very, very difficult in the right way because the support usually comes with constraints.
Yeah.
So if you look at the way the VC systems work with small businesses and small startups, their preferred stocks, the preferences on those stocks, sometimes they choke the little startup to death because of the onerous conditions that they have, right? So I think extremes go every which way, and only the ones that have certain amount of independent funding that they can actually carry out their true vision. How many times I've seen so many times where promising startups, promising companies with great ideas, a few years later, their pure idea becomes a bastardized version of, that you can't even differentiate anymore with whatever's out there, and it looks terrible. And what happened was the professionals came in with more money and turned it into what they know that they think will work, and then it just looks like everything else.
That's literally Anthropic after partnering with Microsoft. Like directly like that.
It happens, and that's life. I think sometimes it gets better, but very rarely. A lot of times you kind of end up with a mediocre product, right? And
the product is good for Anthropic. It's just that Anthropic originally was like, we don't want to fund any military stuff. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. Microsoft gives them $12 billion. They get a contract with the Pentagon.
No, did Microsoft ever give Anthropic 12? Was it OpenAI?
Anthropic.
Anthropic? Okay, because it's like it's very, you got to be careful who you take your money from.
That's the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I think we covered a lot of life there, right?
Yeah, I don't want to put you, if Anthropic wants to partner with you, I don't want to put you in any crosshairs.
I mean, there's nothing like revolutionary that we're doing towards AI. I mean, we could protect certain things in AI, but it's nothing like we depend on AI. Our product is not about AI. It's about using the tools that we know and technologies that we know work, and we put it together very differently. Mm-hmm. I think I was talking to and showing for over like a 2.5 hour period an in-depth demonstration to a retired cybersecurity executive from one of the major oil companies. So this guy, he was one of the managers who was sent out to the far eastern part of like Russia decades ago to set up an oil drilling facility. And, he said like it was one of the weirdest things. But this guy has a lot of experience under his belt for one of the biggest oil companies in the world. And when I showed him our system, and explained everything of how it came about, why it came about, I was like, I couldn't believe what he said. He said, this is the single most well-engineered product I've ever seen. And I was like, really? And he goes, nobody does this type of full life cycle thinking about data and data protection. And he goes, he's never seen something like this. And I told him where I got it from, and he couldn't believe it. So the whole idea comes from, so computer science is one of those areas of study that you could get most of the latest research from academia and corporations on the web, right? It's all the master's theses, the doctoral theses, all the major research papers, they're all on the web, right? You can get it. So when I initially did the research for what became Nuts and eventually QFlex, I could not find any data model that included security that would do what I wanted, right? And so I thought maybe it's not possible. What do? I didn't consider myself a very creative inventor at all. I thought of myself as a technologist that is very good with technology. But then I saw this PBS Nova program on DNA. And so I started looking at that and thinking, if you look at DNA as data, and that your body and your cellular system is a processor for this data, then what you have is a DNA data model. And every data model that I've ever been taught or seen has operating principles, right? How it operates and why. And I'm like, oh, this is actually an interesting exercise. So I started poking around to figure out if I could extract the operating principles of DNA as a data model. And it turns out that if you view it that way, DNA has solved some of the most complex data problems known to mankind already by just the process of evolution, right? So think about, like, have you heard of the objective function?
Like in coding?
Yeah, so there's an objective function for like machine learning, for AI models, right? When you're doing when it's doing the trying to get an answer for you, it's running an objective function. And objective function is a function that measures that the algorithm that you're running is trying to optimize and maximize, right? And so it's like a reward system or measure of reward. And DNA's objective function is to propagate, right? So if you look at our DNA, what does it naturally want to do? It naturally wants to use the energy resources that it could find locally to keep itself alive long enough to reproduce and perpetuate its DNA in some form.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another way to look at life, right? It's what plants do, it's what animals do, it's what trees do, right? Is that there's this sense that everything wants to use the resources around it to give it a chance to continue its DNA lineage. And what is that? That is backing up your data into new repositories, right? So that you don't lose it. And so I started thinking about it in that way. And here's another thought that came up, an operating principle of DNA. Partial data is useless data, right? So, in computer science, when they teach you stuff, they teach you about normalizing data, and they teach you about like how you take data sets, you collect data, you organize it, and you find index keys, right? Like unique attributes, and then you break things up into different tables, right? What I saw in DNA is like that's called partial data when you have different tables with different data in it. And I'm like, if DNA operated that way and you get a paper cut at the end of your finger, you'd be dead by the time DNA put itself together to fix you, right? The only way that paper cut at the end of your fingertip heals is because the cells adjacent to the cut have the full DNA and is capable of reproducing other cells right near it to heal that wound, right? And if it waited for pieces of DNA to coalesce at your fingertip, you'd be dead, and you'll bleed out. So it's like you start learning things like that. And we have no computer system whatsoever that could manage over 30 trillion cells in one body, in one network. There is no such system that we have. But your body does that on a daily basis, and we have over 8 billion people around the world that have that capability, right? That's amazing. So you look at the amount of data processing problems that nature has solved on its own, I think there's a lot to learn there, right? And that's how NUTS came about. That's how QFlex came about, is learning about how DNA manages data if you view it as data and what problems it solved, right?
Yeah, I mean, humans even learn how to fly by modeling nature. They modeled birds.
We have a lot to learn, and we still don't know really how our brains function, right? So I think there's so much that we don't know. And think about it this way: if you agree with me that DNA is data, and that's a data model based on DNA data model, that is the oldest working data model that we know about that we didn't create. How cool is that, right? I mean, there it is. And the thing about computers is that I've noticed that we have revolutions where we try to, solve things in a weird way and in a logical way, but to the extent that we know. But what I've seen is that through the last 10 years or so, by doing this comparative study between DNA viewed as data and how it works versus what we could take from that and try to put that type of characteristic into digital systems, we got a lot to learn because it is actually really, really cool. And we could actually get very, very sophisticated private systems that are organic in nature, and it actually exhibits organic characteristics, which is pretty cool.
Definitely.
Like we have this whole concept in nuts called self-organizing data, because we humans are self-organizing cells, right? And we figured out that you could actually have some of these attributes be mimicked to some degree with just pure data, but do it in data files, but it is self-organizing to a large extent, and it's like, wow, that's actually pretty cool that we could emulate certain characteristics of how our bodies work.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see how this project evolves over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, we're very excited about trying to bring this to the masses so that they could use it for bettering their digital lives. I know that there's always a concern about the use of this technology by bad people, but there's really nothing we could do about it, right? And any technology has the same risks, but I think in general, most of the world is good. That there's more good people than bad, and a lot of people's intentions are generally honest and good, and they try to get something, that they're not out there to always get other people. That's I think the majority of people are like that, and I think if you benefit them, that's good enough.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean,
one more question for the audience. Usually our podcasts are like 40 to an hour long. This is the longest one. I've really enjoyed this, so thank you for your time.
Oh yeah, this has been absolutely a pleasure.
I wanted to ask you, like, as a closing statement for my audience that are really trying to get into, like we were talking about earlier, entrepreneurship. A lot of them are investors and day traders. A lot of them want to be in politics. It seems like you kind of have this intersection between all three, which is pretty interesting. What is the best way for them to go from some random kid, some random young adult, into somebody that has a foot in the door for entrepreneurship, for politics, for becoming a serious trader? I
think you first have to look at yourself and know that you need more information and you need exposure beyond what you think you know. The web has a lot of information, but like we talked about earlier, it doesn't show you all the stuff that is actually available to people, right? It only the things that are eye-catching rises on the web to a lot of visibility. So I think whatever it is, a young person should think about like what direction they want to go and try to get in the door of whatever organization, whether it's a business, whether it's working for a congressman's office or whatever, but get your foot in the door and just learn to work. And then only by being there in a disciplined way are you going to have the opportunity to be exposed to what's going on, to learn what goes on day to day and how things are actually effectuated, right? Changes and actions. And then you'll create that network of people, right? And I, like we said, the relationships are incredibly important to getting to those places where you want to be. And you know what I always told my junior employees is, you know, whatever industry you're in, always be nice to everybody and treat everybody the same way, because you know you have no idea how long people stay in a certain industry. You know, and they will be there decade after decade, and you're too young to make enemies, right? It's just be professional, be nice, and try to be helpful. Don't get the attitude unless you believe that you know your shit don't stink. You know, drop the attitude, be humble, and be open to advice and listen to things, and then start making up your mind after you think about it. But people will want to help people who are open-minded and are very helpful to them, right? They want to do something to those who seem to be like they're trying to get better. And I think that's where mentorship will really help you, in that you know, not all mentors are going to be the right persons for you, but you're going to learn stuff from people who've been in that business for a while, right? There is always something to learn, and you know, take the lessons for what they are, but they're not going to open up to you unless they see that their efforts are not going to be wasted, right? So it's a two-way street, and I think learning how to work every day in a disciplined manner is one of the most important things, because you know it is true that that most of the time, like, the difference between success and failure is just being there. It's true. I mean, I've seen it, and it's happened to me. If you're there and you've been very conscientious and you're a good worker, and something hits the fan, but you're there to try and help the situation, that will be appreciated beyond what you could even recognize at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And so being where you are supposed to be and at the top of your game to whatever level that you've been allowed to achieve, I think you look for those opportunities where you don't drop the ball when it's your turn, right? And sometimes when these things happen, that's where the choice between jumping off a cliff and staying on the cliff, it's like a choice. Like, do you raise your hand and say, "Can I try this? I think it could work." And that's the point where you start learning something about yourself, and you teach others who you think you can become. And that's how you know, pathways open, right? You know, something happened to me like that at Goldman one time, where I was a VP there in the IT department, and you know, I have a natural sense of paranoia when it comes to computer systems, so I always do my own backups, right? And we were working on this complex loans and placement system, and I always backed up the production system so that I could take a copy of it into my test system and play with real data, but it's on my test system, right? So that you're not mucking around with the production system. Then one day, everybody got called into a big meeting room, our whole research department, and the two managers, they were like, "All right, we have a major problem." And we had like 10 high-level consultants. I was a middle-level, employee, and it was like somebody went into our production system and deleted the databases, right? And now the front desk, the loans guys, don't have any clue how to deal with this because calls are coming in, they can't look anything up. And our backup system didn't work the other night. Nobody noticed it. So we don't have any backups. Right. And so he's looking around. First of all, he was like, look, I'm not looking to blame anybody, but we need to figure out how to deal with this problem. And he went around the room, right? These two managers went around the room. He talked to all the top consultants and top managers, and they had no clue what to do. And here I am, one of the newer guys. I'm like, hey, Bernie. And he goes, yeah, Yoon, what do you got? I'm like, I might be able to help you, but I'm not sure. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you know me, you've been complaining to me that I take too much user space, and you've been wanting me to cut it down. Well, part of that user space that I've been wasting and your department's been being charged against, is that I tend to do a backup every few hours of the entire production database. It's like, what? You know? And he's like, why did you do that? And why? I'm like, I do that because I don't want to muck with the production system. I want to muck with it on my own system, but I have a constant backup running. It's like, are you kidding me? And then, so we were able to solve this problem within like 3 or 4 hours, because I had to talk to the one of the head database administrators of all of Goldman, walk him through what I did, and show him how I built this tool that could actually reinstate the database to just a few hours ago. And so it's like, you know, if you're going to do something, you could do the best you can with it, right? And don't just stop there. Think about the problem, make it your own, because you never know where you're going to be called upon to help. And it's at that point that you take a leap, and, you know, I could have been shot down, right? But I instead of keeping quiet, I raised my hand and said, hey, maybe this could help. And it turned out to be, you know, a big help. Save the department, right? And they were like, you know, they told me after that, they sat down and they're like, all right, we want you to have a talk with an interview with one of our managing partners, and then you could have all the space you ever want now. And so I thought it was one of the funniest things, but, you know, just do a good job, and it gets appreciated, you know, and I think that's the only thing I could tell people is, like, know what you're trying to do, but the way you get there is how you handle your business right now. Mm-hmm. Right? The better you do it, the more people will entrust you with new things or bigger things. And that's how you open up possibilities and choices for yourself. And being in that position is what gave you a reputation at Goldman, which eventually helped you become VP. Right. And it's more like, you know, I did a little bit more beyond what I was called to do, and I did it in my own way. I did it on my own time, and they kind of appreciated that I did a job in that fashion. That it's just, I didn't just do the minimum. I went out of my way to really master it, right? And so it shows, and you know, I think people recognize that if you do take a task and really, you know, manhandle it, people actually recognize you for the expert that you're slowly becoming. Yoon, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciated this call, and you know, thank you for interviewing me. You're a great interviewer, great listener, and I had a terrific time on this call. It was a pleasure. Everything you need to know about Yoon is going to be in the description below. His LinkedIn, his sites, everything you need to know about him. Make sure to subscribe, smash the like button, follow, etc.